going to continue our breakdown of the miniseries Crisis on Infinite Earths with issue number 3 on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hey there, panelologists. Welcome to this video. Please, if you enjoy this content, like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below. All of it's appreciated. I'm doing a series of videos that are basically guides through the Crisis on Infinite Earths miniseries from 1985 and 1986 because it introduces so many characters from throughout DC history that it's hard to realize who they are, essentially without a scorecard. So we're going to go through the book. We're going to go through issue number 3. We already have posted videos of issues 1 and 2, and we're going to be doing issues 4 through 12 subsequently, so that you get an idea of where these characters stood at the time of publication. I'm not going to go into details on the characters' history after this, because for many of them, that's really convoluted. You know, with reboots and all sorts of other retcons. But this is basically where these characters were when this book was published. And we're going to talk about first appearances and kind of give you a primer. Now, some of these characters were already in issue 1 or issue 2 of Crisis, so I cover them more in detail in those, and you can go back and take a look at those videos. So what I would recommend is if you have the issues or a trade paperback or a digital, you're reading the book digitally, just read the issue and then come back and go through it so you have a better understanding of where everything fits into DC history. So let's dive in. Okay, so we can see from the cover here, you have the Monitor in the middle and these 4 different points. And what it was is the plot device was that the Monitor had these huge towers that he constructed in key moments in history. And we already had gone to the near post-apocalyptic future of Kamandi in issue number 2. And now we have 4 of the others that we're going to visit. So George Perez crams a lot of characters into this cover. We're not going to go into each of them here because we're going to spend time talking about the characters as we go through the book. So here we are in the Monitor satellite with Harbinger and the Earth 3 Alexander Luthor, who has been growing up very quickly, the son of Alexander Luthor, the hero of Earth 3. Who we were introduced to, or reintroduced to, in issue number 1, and his wife Lois Lane Luthor, and how they sent their son away from their doomed world to Earth 1, basically paralleling Superman's origin story. And we can see here that Alexander Luthor is imbued with some sort of, cosmic powers that he's partially made up of, like the stars. So the Monitor's testing him. And it's kind of explained that he is an anomaly, positive and negative matter existing within one form, and impossibility. So the Monitor's trying to figure out what's going on. In the meantime, we have this backstory of Harbinger. Although I owe him my very life, I now do the bidding of his enemy. So setting up this development in the plot of what's going on with the Monitor and Harbinger and Alexander Luthor, as we're, in the meantime, introduced to all these different DC characters throughout time. So now she reports back to this shadowy figure. I have news of the Monitor, along with Psycho Pirate. The shadowy figure, Harbinger, I need to know why you are here indeed. I know all as soon as the Monitor himself thinks it. Destroy the Luthor child. The dead can present no threat. Now go do as I command. So Harbinger is being compelled to betray the Monitor. And the shadowy figure is, Harbinger will do as I require. Before long, she will slay the Monitor, and that alone is reason for me to keep her alive. We're back to Barry Allen. Earth 1, Our Future. I've lived here only a month now since Flash number 350, which also came out in 1985. A month of happiness and hope. Like, he had been convicted of killing Reverse Flash after his own wife was killed, but he finds out that she's living in the future. But now he's seeing that there's all this destruction in the future being caused by this antimatter wave, which Flash now sees. What is that? What is that? So Flash sees it coming at him, and only one hope, one chance, I pray to, and then he vibrates away. It seems as though he's doing that on his own volition. So now the second half of the page, we come to Earth 1, July 1985, which for this comic book is present day. And the end of the world is at hand. So we see in this second row of panels, in the fourth panel, two characters. And we see below, it's basically a team-up between the new Teen Titans, one of DC's most popular titles at the time, and the Outsiders, who were a team, originally Batman and the Outsiders, which we'll get to. So this is really the first full appearance of the Teen Titans. We have seen Cyborg already, but here they are as a team. The Teen Titans premiered in Brave and the Bold number 54 in July of 1964 by Bob Haney and Bruno Premiani, which was really not titled Teen Titans. It was a team up of Robin, Kid Flash, and Aqualad, and then eventually became Teen Titans, which we'll talk about in a minute. The new Teen Titans, which includes, so the character we see in this second row, fourth panel with the orange skin is Starfire, if you're at all familiar with the Teen Titans Go TV series. She's a very popular character there. She is one of the new Teen Titans, who we see here. She premiered first in DC Comics Presents number 26, October of 1980, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. She is Princess Coriander of the planet Tamaran. She is a warrior, but she comes to Earth kind of with a lot of naivete. And they have this plot device in that DC Comics Presents issue where in order to acquire the language that humans are speaking, English, because she lands in the United States, as she's trying to escape her captors, her parents, who were the royal family of Tamaran, had sent her and her sister away as part of a peace deal with the Vegans, the bad guys of that solar system, and then she was escaping from them, came to Earth. So by making physical contact with someone who spoke English, she was able to acquire the language. She decides to make physical contact with Robin, Dick Grayson, by kissing him, which results in a romantic relationship that is going on at this time. So, and then right below her in that panel with the blonde and multicolored hair and the black costume is the character Halo from The Outsiders. Her first appearance was also the first appearance of The Outsiders in Brave and the Bold 200, the last issue of that series from July of 1983. Halo and The Outsiders were created by Mike W. Barr and Jim Aparo. And then after that Brave and the Bold issue, Brave and the Bold basically changed to Batman and the Outsiders number 1. She is Oracle, an ancient energy being who has a sphere of light, comes to Earth and possesses the body of a recently murdered sociopath, Violet Harper. So she has this Earth body, and Violet Harper had sins in her past, which now Halo, who also, much like Starfire, is imbued with a lot of naivete, starts to feel some guilt and remorse about. So she has light-based powers. And then we see in the fifth panel, we see a bunch of birds being destroyed by the energy wave. In the bottom, we see a green bird, and that is Changeling, originally the character Beast Boy, who premiered in Doom Patrol number 99 in November of 1965, created by Arnold Drake and Bob Brown. He kind of became a kid sidekick of the Doom Patrol. His parents were in Africa studying wildlife, I believe. They were scientists. And as a boy, he contracted a rare illness that was lethal to every species except the West African green monkey. Pretty sure there are no green monkeys in West Africa, but that's beside the point. So his father gave him a serum that basically changed him into a green monkey temporarily. And the side effect was that it gave him these powers that he could change into any animal. Subsequently, his parents died, and he was kind of taken in by the Doom Patrol and eventually adopted by Rita Farr, a Lasta woman, a member of the Doom Patrol, and her husband, Steve Dayton, who is the character Mento, which we will see in this series. Then, kind of after the Doom Patrol died, he was left in the care of Steve Dayton. Then he was in the care of I think it was his uncle, who was abusive, but he was able to become a child actor because they didn't have to pay for special effects because you change into any animal on the show Space Trek 2020. Kind of sounds like what you think it is. It's like a Star Wars, Star Trek, Space 1999 ripoff. He becomes very wealthy, also because he's son of Steve Drayton, who is very wealthy as well. And he changes his name to Changeling and joins the new Teen Titans as their youngest member. And so he is always green and has the power and ability to change into any animal. And then we see this full panel at the bottom of the page, which introduces us to a bunch of other characters. So we see Cole and Starfire at the top as we go down. In the red costume is Wonder Girl, Donna Troy. Her first appearance was in the second appearance of the Teen Titans, Brave and the Bold number 60, in July of 1965, created by Bob Haney and Bruno Premiani. She has a very convoluted history. There was some confusion because in the Wonder Woman book, they were publishing these stories of Wonder Woman as a girl and as a baby, Wonder Tot and Wonder Girl. And there was some confusion at one point of whether or not that was a separate character. Well, I think the editors and writers who created Teen Titans thought that it was a separate character and they could use a female character, so let's get the sidekick of Wonder Woman. But that character didn't really exist on her own. It was a younger version of Wonder Woman, maybe not. Imaginary tales, who knows? So they created this Donna Troy persona. She is a longstanding member of the Teen Titans, is a member of the new Teen Titans, and basically she was this child, Donna Troy, who was rescued from a building that was on fire by Wonder Woman. The people in the apartment were dead, so Wonder Woman assumed that she was orphaned. It turned out that she was part of a child's trading ring or something. And it was all detailed in New Teen Titans number 38, which is Who is Donna Troy? One of my favorite books of all time. Very emotional as Dick Grayson uses his detective skills to find out about her past, which she never knew about. But anyway, Wonder Woman brings her to Paradise Island, heals the injury she has with the purple healing ray, and trains her as an Amazon. And she ends up taking on, the powers of Wonder Woman. And she's now a little bit older than a teen when the new Teen Titans takes place, and she has this relationship. She's a professional photographer, and she has a relationship with a college professor, Terry Long. And in Tales of the Teen Titans number 50, they get married. It was a whole big thing. So that's kind of where we stand right here. Then we move off to her right, and we see kind of in the magenta and orange, we see Metamorpho. So that's the character Metamorpho. His first appearance was in Brave and the Bold 57, ironically right between the two Teen Titans' first appearances, in January of 1965, created by Bob Haney and Ramona Fredone. He was Rex Mason, who was tasked by Simon Stagg, an industrialist, to he went to this Egyptian archaeological dig, and when he encountered the Orb of Ra, it imbued him with these powers where he has the ability to change his body into any other chemical. The problem is that his physical form is like that. And he's also immortal because he's really no longer human. But he also obviously doesn't look human, and that becomes a point of problem for him. He did have a couple of Brave and the Bold appearances, and then he had his own series in the 1960s for 17 issues. He was recruited by the Justice League but didn't join. And then he had backup features in the 70s, and then eventually joined the Outsiders because due to his appearance, he was an outsider. And again, as I said, he has the ability to change into different chemicals. Now we go kind of to the foreground. All the way on the left is the character Jericho. Jericho is a member of the Teen Titans. His first appearance was in Tales of the Teen Titans number 43, June of 1984, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. He is the son of Deathstroke, Joseph Wilson, and he's a mute due to a point in his childhood when he was kidnapped by foes of Deathstroke who were threatening to kill him with a knife to his throat, the child's throat. And Deathstroke intervened, but not quickly enough to avoid some damage where the throat was cut and it severed the vocal cords. And he does possess the ability through eye contact with another person to possess that person's body. And he's, unlike his father, he's depicted as very kind. That changes. But he does become a member of the Teen Titans. And he is at this point in time. And then we go just to the right on the motorcycle is Nightwing, Dick Grayson, who was the original Robin, the first Robin. And we'll talk about him because that's a separate character here. Premiered in Detective Comics 38 in 1940. But really, Dick Grayson is credited with his first appearance in Superman 76, much like Batman, as the Earth 1 Robin, because that's the first time that there was a story where Superman met Batman. For the characters that were continuously published, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Robin, Green Arrow and Speedy, and Aquaman, there's a very almost arbitrary distinction between their Gold and Silver Age characters, because, the first Silver Age appearance is in issue X. Well, the issue prior to that, the character appeared as well. And there was very little difference you could tell at the time. There's not a clear demarcation. But Robin had been the boy wonder, the sidekick to Batman for many years, appeared in most Batman adventures for a long time, and then became the teen wonder as he got older, as Batman was kind of updated in the late 60s, early 70s to be darker. Robin got his backup stories, had stories in the Batman Family title, and was a founding member and usually the leader of the Teen Titans. Was there all throughout the Teen Titans run, and also is the leader of the new Teen Titans. Well, I guess he kind of grew tired of the short pants and pixie boots, so in Tales of the Teen Titans number 44 in July of 1984, he takes on the Nightwing persona. The first appearance of Nightwing, and Nightwing and Flamebird they eventually became part of Kryptonian mythology, but the first Nightwing was actually Superman. When the bottled city of Kandor thought that Superman had the ability to enlarge them, but was refusing to do so, Superman and Jimmy Olsen in Superman issue number 158, January 1963, took on the guises to protect their own identities of Nightwing and Flamebird to go down and prove Superman's innocence. So let's keep going. To just to his right, or just to the right of Nightwing, there is Black Lightning, a member of the Outsiders. His first appearance was his own self-titled issue number 1 in April of 1977, created by Tony Isabella and Trevor Von Eden. He was the first lead black character in a DC comic, and the creators kind of had to work around a little bit to have something that wasn't terribly racist, but still there were elements that were a little, he wore an afro wig and talked in jive. The character Jefferson Davis is a school teacher by day, and he also was a former Olympic gold medal decathlete, which it seems as though in DC Comics a lot of those folks became superheroes, because the original Mr. Terrific, I don't think, won a gold medal. But there was, the Amazing Man was also, I think he won the gold medal. I don't remember at the top of my head. Anyway, and in his original incarnation, his lightning powers came from a belt designed for him by, the suit was created by Peter Gamby, who, is depicted as someone who does that kind of as an expertise in creating super suits. So anyway, he had his own series for 11 issues until the DC implosion in 1978. And then he had backups. He was recruited by the Justice League and declined at one point. And eventually he joins the Outsiders as a founding member in Brave and the Bold 200. Then in front of him, almost with the wingy kind of sleeves, is the character Cole. She was a brand new character at this point in time. Her first appearance was in New Teen Titans Volume 2, number 9 in June of 1985. And so this basically the same month that this book premiered. She was never a member of the Teen Titans per se, but she did kind of hang out, which wasn't officially. Her real name was Cole Weathers, so they didn't really do a lot of work to come up with a superhero name for her. She was created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. And her father, who was kind of like a survivalist, figuring there was going to be a post-apocalyptic future real soon, grafted onto her body crystal and promethium, which gave her the ability to create and control these silicon crystals, which you can see her building the wall in this panel. So she did not have much of a backstory up until then, other than that she could create this wall. Then, just to her right with the sword is Katana, initial member of the Outsiders, her first appearance in Brave and the Bold 200, created by Bar and Aparo. And she is Tatsu Yamashiro. She is of Japanese origin. And basically, there were two brothers who were competing for her affections. She married one. The other brother had joined the Yakuza. And then the brother she didn't marry killed her husband and her children. And she got the possession of this soul sword. And the husband was killed with his soul sword. So like the husband's soul is imbued in the sword. Again, she is a member of the Outsiders, and basically at this point in time, that book had been running for about 2 years. So it's the new Teen Titans and the Outsiders are on the case here as we get to this next section of our adventure. So we see a little bit more of this, more of the same. Katana, what uses a sword against a threat like this? Cole is trying to build this these crystal structures to save people. She creates these slides, and then Starfire blasting against the energy wave. Beast Boy changes into an elephant. Black Lightning is trying to save some old folks. So Donna Troy and Halo are trying to save people. This little girl under the bed. Then the building collapses. We see swooping in at the last minute, which Dick Grayson doesn't see, is Earth 1 Superman. And we have to make the distinction for a lot of these characters between Earth 1 and Earth 2 because they will both be kind of going back and forth in this story. So basically, Batman and Superman come to get everyone together. They're not having any effect on the antimatter swooping in. And they basically are recruiting the Teen Titans and the Outsiders to be part of this bigger team that they need to gather all the heroes together. And then the Flash appears in an apparition. He doesn't even know what's happening to him. And he basically pulls Batman away from Flash, and Flash just kind of disappears in a lightning bolt. And everyone is shocked. So we get several pages of the new Teen Titans and the Outsiders. Now we go into outer space, and we see this spaceship, which is the spaceship of Brainiac. And we see a robot Brainiac inside. Brainiac was one of Superman's main villains. He originally appeared in Action Comics 242 in July of 1958, created by Otto Binder and Al Plastino. Originally, he was an alien from the planet Kolu, and basically he would go throughout space to different civilizations and almost as scientists collecting specimens, he would collect entire cities and shrink them down into bottles. And one of those cities that he collected was from the planet Krypton, the bottled city of Kandor. So he's flying around space throughout the entire Silver and Bronze Age with an entire city of Kryptonians on his spaceship with no powers. Eventually, Superman gets hold of the bottled city, but doesn't have the technology to unshrink the city and its inhabitants. He keeps them in the Fortress of Solitude. And what Brainiac does, he comes to Earth, wants to shrink down Metropolis, and is thwarted by Superman. In later stories in the Silver Age, it's revealed that he's a robot. Even though we had met his descendant, Brainiac 5, from the Legion of Superheroes in issue number 2 of Crisis, and we'll see him again. It's explained that Brainiac had an adopted son, Brainiac 2, from Kolu, and then Brainiac 5 is the descendants of him. I guess Koluans have very long lifespans if, like, the fourth descendant is 1,000 years in the future. And then in Action Comics number 544 in June of 1983, Brainiac is given a new look. He was a green-skinned alien with, like, electrodes on his head and, like, a pink suit. And eventually he becomes this more robotic Brainiac that was seen, for a couple of years leading up to this Crisis story. And he needs assistance on Earth, and only the one who calls himself Luthor can help me now. We'll talk about Lex Luthor when we see him. We'd already met one Luthor. There are a total of 3 that we will, well, actually 5. Because we meet Lois Luthor from Earth 3, and we met the Alexander Luthor Jr., that we saw in the beginning of this issue. But there are two more Lex Luthors that we have yet to meet. But it kind of sets up the thing that Brainiac realizes that in order to save the universe, he's going to need to enlist the help of villains. Right? And it's in the villain's best interest to save the universe as well. Now we go to another one of these monitor towers that were built, and we're in 1944, World War II, in the small nation of Markovia. Character that we've already met. Geoforce is a prince of Markovia. So we see Nazis, we see American troops, and we'll talk about who they all are as we go through the next several pages. Now, I believe that as we go to the fifth panel, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth panel, we see them briefly in the fourth, and we see in the fifth these 2 GIs. Those are Sergeant Rock in the foreground and Bulldozer. No, I'm sorry, Wild Man. That's Wild Man with the red beard in the background. We'll talk more about them. And then in the 6th panel, we see this tank with a Confederate flag. That is the Haunted Tank. And then we see in this big panel at the bottom of the page, Lieutenant Stewart, what in the world's going on here? It's snowing in the middle of June. I ain't never seen an airplane like that oversized cockroach flying overhead. That's Blue Beetle, who we met in issue 1. And now that thing ahead of us, what is it? If I knew the answer to that, Gus, I'd be a general and not a mere lieutenant. So who we're introduced to is the inhabitants of the Haunted Tank. The Haunted Tank was a series, and so we're going to see a lot of the characters from DC's war books in this little passage here. The Haunted Tank made its first appearance in GI Combat number 87 from May of 1961. And it ran all the way until issue 288 of GI Combat. This feature was created by Robert Kanigher and Russ Heath. And basically, the driver of the tank is Jeb Stuart, who is the descendant of a Civil War general, J.E.B. Stuart, who is a ghost that inhabits the tank. And only Jeb can see his ancestor ghost. And so there's that juxtaposition. They have the rest of the crew in the tank, and we make reference here to Jeb Stuart and Gus. Gus Gray made his first appearance in GI Combat number 160 in 1973. And he was created by Archie Goodwin and Sam Glanzman. Now, the other members of the Haunted Tank are Sergeant William Craig, Eddie Craig, his son. Sergeant Craig first appeared in GI Combat 244 in August of 1982, and his son, Eddie, came on board in GI Combat 251 in March of 1983. And Rick Rawlins is the other member of the team at this time. And he was a part of the original Haunted Tank crew. And then we kind of see in the bottom right other members of Easy Company. We'll talk about that as we go on to the next page. So here we see a closer look at Jeb Stewart. And then we see the tank. We see his in the black clouds, the ghost of his ancestor, General Stewart. Now, we go down to the first panel on the second row, and we are introduced to the characters by name. Bulldozer on the left and Four Eyes on the right. Those are both members of Sergeant Rock's Easy Company. So let's talk a little bit overarching. We've already seen Sergeant Rock, and he's in the middle bottom panel. So Sergeant Rock's first appearance, Frank Rock, was in GI Combat number 68 in January of 1959, kind of a prototype story called The Rock. His first full appearance is considered Our Army at War number 81 in April of 1959. He was created by Robert Conagher and Joe Kubert. And basically, his title ran in Our Army at War until it was changed to Sergeant Rock. And Our Army at War ran through issue number 301 in 1977. And then the book became titled just Sergeant Rock, starting with issue number 302. And it was still running at the time of Crisis, would run all the way to issue 422, and it was really the last gasp of the war comics that were pretty popular starting in the late 1940s and certainly in the 50s and 60s. Started to lose a little bit of popularity in the 70s, but they were still like a mainstay of DC publications, even into the 80s. So the team that Sergeant Rock is in charge of, the platoon, is called Easy Company. And we see several of the members. So in the second row, first panel here, pushing this Nazi soldier up against the wall, is the character Bulldozer. His first appearance was in Our Army at War 105, created by Robert Conagher and Joe Kubert. He's the second in command of Easy Company. He has the real name Horace Canfield. Now, the bispectacled individual is Four Eyes. His first appearance is a little bit later on, Our Army at War number 294 in July of 1976, created by Robert Conagher and Frank Redondo. And despite the fact that he is bespectacled, he is one of the best sharpshooters in Easy Company. Then in this middle panel, you see Dr. Polaris and Geoforce, who were part of the assemblage that the Monitor put together in issue number 1, and Geoforce is back in Markovia during World War II, and he's upset that the Nazis are attacking his people. We go to the middle panel at the bottom, where we see Sergeant Rock with the sergeant stripes on his helmet, and the character Wildman, who is Harold Shapiro, an English teacher from Colorado, who is nicknamed Wildman because usually he's very passive and calm, but then when fighting starts, he becomes a wild man. His first appearance was in Our Army at War number 113 in December of 1961. Now we go on to the next page, and we have a lot going on with the snow falling in the middle of this great George Perez artwork. So Blue Beetle's up in his little, flying beetle, and then the Nazis are attacking this this flower woman, and they're shooting bullets at Dr. Polaris, which doesn't work. And he is killed by the character here with the flowers in his helmet, and that's one of Easy Company's characters called Farm Boy. His first appearance in Our Army at War number 143, July 1964, created by Conagher and Kubert. He has no known name in the comics, and he's kind of a pacifist involved in war and a very reticent individual, and one of the regular members of Easy Company. The Nazis are holed up, and then they're attacked by these 4 individuals called the Losers. All right? And the Losers were characters that were originally in different publications in war comics in DC, and we'll talk about each of them. So the guy in the blue jacket and the sailor's hat is Captain Storm, who first appeared in his own self-titled issue number 1 in June of 1964, created by Robert Kanigher and Irv Novick. William Storm, he has a boat that is attacked by a Japanese submarine, and his crew is killed. He survives, but he also loses a leg and an eye, so he has a wooden leg and an eye patch. And he was in his own self-titled series that ran for 18 issues in the mid-1960s, and he does become the leader of the Losers. Also, in the bottom left of the panel, in the brown jacket, is Johnny Cloud, a Native American fighter pilot, who his Native American name is Flying Cloud, which kind of leads to him being a fighter pilot. His first appearance was in All-American Men of War number 82 in December of 1960, also, like Captain Storm, created by Kanigher and Novick. And his series ran from All-American Men of War 82 all the way through 115. And then the other 2 characters are Gunner and Sarge. Gunner Mackey and Sarge Clay. Their first appearance was in All-American Men of War number 67 in March of 1959. They were created by Robert Kanigher and Jerry Grandinetti. They eventually had a long-running series in Our Fighting Forces, issues number 45 through 94. And they also have a dog. And I don't think we see the dog actually in the book. A dog Pooch, which is their sidekick. So what happens is they were all in their own titles, and then eventually they were put together, I guess, probably as DC was consolidating the number of war books. Robert Kanigher put them all together in GI Combat 138 in November of 1969 as the Losers, and brought all 4 of them together. You know, they had lost, platoons they were in charge of, so they were considered losers. And they had a series in the Our Fighting Forces magazine from issue 123 all the way through 181. And in the midst of that, issues 151 through 162 were written and drawn by Jack Kirby. And because it was Jack Kirby, he just completely ignored any history those characters had before he took over the title. So if you start reading issue number 151, it doesn't make sense if you read the previous issues. So he did it for a year on the book. And so those are the 4 losers. And we can see here they even call themselves out. I guess that Sarge is pulling the pin out of the grenade. The top brass calls us the losers. Now let's show them how wrong they are. And the Germans are surprised. The haunted tank fires on the Germans. And then Easy Company comes in, and we see a line of all the members of Easy Company. The other main members that we'll see in the next couple of pages, trying to pinpoint each of them. So we see Johnny Cloud and Captain Storm fighting the Nazis. Captain Storm climbs up, and one of the shadow demons comes out, and then we see this middle panel. And I'm not sure who this is. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I know who this is on the left. On the left is Little Sure Shot, a member of Easy Company. First appearances in Our Army at War number 127 in February of 63, created by Robert Kanigher and Joe Kubert. He is Louis Kiahani, an Apache, and that's why he always has feathers in his helmet. And on the right is Jackie Johnson, who, just like Wild Man, premiered in Our Army at War number 113, created by Kanigher and Kubert. He is a former boxing champion who's working as a hospital orderly in Harlem when he enlists in the Army, and was significant because that's 1961, and he becomes a fairly prominent African-American character. The other character from Easy Company, and I don't think that he's here, but I don't think he's specifically mentioned, is Ice Cream Soldier. Philip Mason, first appearances in Our Army at War 85 in August of 1959. And he kind of has to prove himself. Here he is. He's the guy in kind of this penultimate panel with the blonde bangs who's like Sarge. That's Ice Cream Soldier. He was given the Ice Cream Soldier name because he melted in battle, but then he proves that wrong. And then here in this final panel, the Shadow Demons kill all 4 of the losers. Since their exploits were no longer being published by DC Comics at the time, they did have a one-issue special, Losers Special, that came out at the time of Crisis and gave a whole backstory to them and their final adventure, including all of their deaths here. And then we see each of them, Gunner, Sarge, Johnny Cloud, the Navajo Ace, and Captain Storm. They were called the losers, but they're winners in the end. And then they kill Farm Boy, Flower. The rest of them are pulled away, and Polaris and Geoforce are able to destroy one of the shadow creatures. Blue Beetle jumps in trying to destroy, but his shoulder is injured by one of the shadow things. It exploded because of the blue scarab the original Blue gave me. Dan Garrett said it had mystical powers. Thank heaven for little bugs. This is the mention of Dan Garrett. He's only mentioned here, and it's kind of a convoluted. Dan Garrett was the original Blue Beetle, and his first appearance was in Mystery Men Comics #1, August of 1939 by Fox Features. He ran for 31 issues of Mystery Men Comics and 60 issues of his own series, even though by the end of the Golden Age, it was more like good girl art and those kinds of things than superhero stories. Charlton reprinted some of his stories. And then in 1964, he got his own book for 4 issues before the Blue Beetle mantle was taken over by Tent Cord. Even though Dan Garrett is partially in public domain, at least the original character, I guess the character that Charlton published, DC acquired the rights to. And in Secret Origins #2, which came out right after this, DC did publish a Secret Origin of Dan Garrett. And all of his appearances have been in flashback intermittently in DC Comics. But very little up to here, and this is the first mention of Dan Garrett in DC Comics. So Blue Beetle avoids the Shadow Demons, Monitor's watching what's going on. We go back to the future, the great disaster, the post-apocalyptic future of Commandy. And Solivar has been injured. And then Solivar maybe dies. He just kind of disappears. And Commandy doesn't know why, because he felt close to Solivar in the brief time they spent together. And then the bottom of the page, the last 2 panels, we're in Coyote, Texas in 1879 to introduce us to the characters from DC's Western genre of characters. And being thrown out of the saloon in the bottom panel is Batlash. He came to save the West or destroy it. So Batlash made his first appearance in Showcase number 76 in August of 1968, created by Joe Orlando, Carmine Infantino, Sheldon Mayer, and Sergio Aragones. He did have 7 issues of his own self-titled series, and it was kind of like a comical character. He was sort of probably akin to the James Garner, Brett Maverick character, or the support your local gunfighter kind of thing. And then we're seeing him thrown out of the saloon, which is, I'm sure there's just some misunderstanding. It's actually a very burly woman that's thrown him out. And he says goodbye, and then he rides into the desert and sees this thing that he doesn't know what the heck it is. It's one of the Monitor things. And then he runs into a bunch of the other DC Western characters. So we'll go in the bottom panel because we all see them by face. On the left is Scalp Hunter, who is a character, Brian Savage, who was stolen from his parents by Kiowa Indians and given an Indian name, which means he who is less than human. So he is a white man dressed up as a Native American. His first appearance was in Weird Western Tales number 39 in March, April of 1977. and he stayed with that book through issue 70 in 1980. In the blue hat is Johnny Thunder, the Western character Johnny Thunder, not to be confused with another character that we will see later, a member of the Justice Society of America. His first appearance was in All American Comics number 100 in August of 1948, as DC was moving away from superheroes in the late 40s to other genres, including Westerns. And he was created by Robert Kanigher and Alex Toth. He has the secret identity of John Tane, who's a school teacher in the West, and then uses his identity as Johnny Thunder to fight injustice. And he appeared in All-American Western number 67 through 117. And then he had, in the 1970s, had a 3-issue reprint series of his exploits. The guy with the mask is Nighthawk. He is Joe Millard. Oh, no, he was created by Joe Millard and Charles Paris in Western Comics number 5 in October of 1948, so just 2 months after Johnny Thunder's introduction. He is Hannibal Hawks, a traveling repairman in the Old West, who dons the mask and the identity of Nighthawk to fight crime. And he ran in Western Comics issue number 5, and then appeared again starting in issue number 7, all the way through issue number 76 in 1959. So DC was really like pulling some characters out of the mothballs here. I'm not sure he had appeared again, and probably in some reprints over the years. And then the final character is the best known. He was in his own title at this point in time, and that is Jonah Hex, who was a member of the Confederate Army. He was disfigured, left the Confederacy, and his first appearance was in All-Star Western number 10 in February-March 1972, created by John Albano and Tony DeZuniga. Eventually, I think with issue 12, All-Star Western became Weird Western Tales. He was the lead in Weird Western Tales through issue number 38, where he was replaced by Scalp Hunter, but then he got his own series, which ran for 92 issues, pretty much up until about the time of Crisis. Then he had a different series after that, where he was in the future. So we see these Western characters trying to figure out what's going on, and then they're introduced to 4 of the characters that we met in the Summoning. And we get Simon, Cyborg, John Stewart, and Firebrand. And after a little superhero misunderstanding, especially involving, the race of a couple of characters, then in the last panel here, we see these shadow demons are going to come out. We see the shadow demons, and our heroes fight them, including the Western heroes with their I guess, 6-shooters. And then Green Lantern, John Stewart, tries to blast them, and his power ring doesn't work, which probably has something to do with the disruption in Oa that we saw in issue number 2. Nighthawk tries to get away and warn townspeople, and he's too late, and he is engulfed by the antimatter. He would come back. A lot of these characters make appearances throughout DC Comics post-Crisis, and are retconned in different ways, including Nighthawk. He's actually retconned as one of the incarnations of Hawkman. Metropolis, the 30th century. We're back with the Legion of Superheroes. Now, we had previously met, and I'm going to go to the third panel, to Lightning Lass and Wildfire, the second and fourth characters here. But we see the first character here in the red and yellow costume is Sunboy. His first appearance was in Action Comics 276 in May of 1960, created by Jerry Siegel and Jim Mooney. He is Dirk Morgana, an Earthling whose father was a scientist working at a nuclear facility. The evil Dr. Regulus attacked the facility, threw Dirk into the reactor, but because of a freak genetic anomaly, he, instead of dying, he got these powers of control of heat and light. And then in the pink and black costume is Cosmic Boy, one of the original 3 members of the Legion of Superheroes who appeared first in Adventure Comics 247, the first appearance of the Legion, in April of 1958, created by Otto Binder and Al Plastino. He is Rock Kryn from the planet Brawl, and he has magnetism powers. much like Dr. Polaris, and he came along several years before Magneto. And then with the helmet is Wildfire that we talked about in issue number 2. Then we go down, we see Brainiac 5 and Dream Girl. Dream Girl has precognitive powers and is able to see the future, a dream. She first appeared in Adventure Comics 317 in February of 1964, created by Edwin Hamilton and John Forte. And she is Nora Nal from the planet Naltor. She's a precog. She had left the Legion because originally she had a dream that the Legionnaires, several Legionnaires were killed, but they were only like Legion robots that were destroyed. So she left the Legion, but then with her boyfriend, Starboy, who had been kicked out, they come back and rejoin the Legion just a little bit later on. And then we see, but in England, we see this character, Kid Psycho. Kid Psycho, his first appearance was in Superboy 125 in December of 1965, created by Otto Binder and George Papp. He is Gnil O'Priel from the planet Hajor. His parents were scientists who had exposure to radiation, and I guess that radiation caused a genetic defect, which gave him a big head, which is why he wore a turban, and also mental powers, which we can see him trying to use here. He attempted to join the Legion, but the problem was that his mental powers, every time he used them, he lost a year off his life. So he probably could have used them a lot more, considering what happens at the end of this page. He only had about half a dozen appearances prior to Crisis. More often he'd have like mentions, or he'd be in a text page about reservist members of the Legion. They didn't accept him into the Legion proper because they didn't want him to use his powers and like die. So he became a reservist Legionnaire. So then in this next panel, on the left of the bottom series of panels, we see 2 more members of the Legion of Superheroes. In kind of the pinkish purplish black costume with the blonde hair is Element Lad, who also, who appeared in Adventure Comics 307, April of 1963, created by Edwin Hamilton and John Forte. He is John Ara of the planet Trom, who has ability to transmute any element from one element into another. And he's the last surviving member of his race. He was a Legion member throughout the Silver and Bronze Age into the Copper Age here. And he did, in the Bronze Age, have a romantic relationship with one of the members of the Science Police. Siobhan Erin was the member of the Science Police he had a romantic relationship with here. And then a character that I missed the first go-around here is Mon-El in the red costume with the blue cape. And his first appearance was in Superboy number 89 in June of 1961. He was created by Robert Bernstein and George Papp. And what it is this alien crash lands on Earth with amnesia, but he has amnesia. And he has the same set of powers as Superboy. But he had previously been on Krypton. Jor-El warned him about the planet's imminent destruction and gave him a map to Earth. So he shows up on a Monday. So Superboy figures that's his brother. Gives him the name Monday. Earth, L, the Superboy's last name. Gives him this secret identity. Bob Cobb is his cousin visiting. I think it was his cousin. But he's immune to kryptonite. He has the same power set as Superboy, but he has a weakness to lead, which is very plentiful on Earth, and Superboy can't figure out how to cure it. So in order to save his life, he puts him in the Phantom Zone. And it takes 1,000 years how to figure out his lead poisoning. And eventually, in Adventure Comics 300, he's cured of his lead poisoning and gets out of the Phantom Zone and becomes a full-fledged member of the Legion of Superheroes, essentially with the same powers as Superboy. He is a Daxamite from the planet Daxam, and his Daxamite name is Largand. And he's a long-serving member of the Legion of Superheroes, and has his girlfriend is Shadowlass of the Legion of Substitute Heroes. So he's often used as the kind of the Superboy replacement. So then what happens is they're trying to get in touch with Kid Psycho, and this crumbling rocks knock him out, and the antimatter wave comes in, and Kid Psycho is dead. And now we see ancient Atlantis, the Old West, the 30th century. Everything is all coming to an end. And Harbinger says, Monitor says, time for my plan to begin. And Harbinger says, wrong, old fool. It is time for you to die. Next, this is the big one. The end of the multiverse, when worlds die. And that is the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths number 3. I'd like to thank you for stopping by and spending some time getting a little bit of DC Comics history up through 1985. And the number of characters does become even more dense as we go on. And we're going to be introduced to a whole bunch of other characters. But it's interesting to see how they were playing with different genres, the war books, the Western books, and different periods in DC history. One thing that it was a big thing, the Legion of Superheroes were one of DC's best-selling titles in the mid-'80s, and were a big part of DC history because of their connection to Superman and also to Supergirl. And so they play a pretty prominent role in this storyline, as obviously do the New Teen Titans, because they were the best-selling title at the time, and they were also being written and drawn by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. So I'd like to thank you for stopping by and spending some time here. Hopefully you learned a few things, and it increases your enjoyment of reading these comics. In the meantime, you can take a look at the first 2 installments in this series. And I'd like to thank you for stopping by. And until next time, this is Jim saying, enjoy your comics.